Hi, my name is Clare and I'm the mother of 3 teenagers with FASD.
I'm Jessica, a PhD researcher specialising in educational interventions for children with FASD.
And together we are the hosts of Spotlight on FASD, the UK's first podcast dedicated to shining a spotlight on fetal alcohol spectrum disorders.
FASD is a condition caused by prenatal alcohol exposure that affects hundreds of thousands of children across the UK.
And we're here to bring these conversations out of the shadows and make sure that no one living with FASD feels alone. Hi everyone and welcome back to Spotlight on FASD. This week we are very excited and very honoured to have Professor Penny Cook from the University of Salford talking to us about the UK's very first prevalence study around FASD, and it was done in the Greater Manchester area, and so we've just been briefly talking to Penny before we hit record, like we always do, and Miss Snow so many brilliant snippets of information, and we were talking about how important this piece of work is, and how in decades to come there will be students in universities learning all about FASD, and we'll be looking back at this as kind of this pioneering piece of work. So thank you so much for sparing the time, Penny, to come and speak to us about this. And I'm going to start you off with my first question, which is always this just purely selfish question, because I'm always fascinated to know how it happens. How did you enter into the world of FASD?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. How did I get well? Do you know, a lot of these stories go back to Raja Mukherjee, don't they? Because you've interviewed him already. Yeah. Absolutely incredible what he's done to bring FASD into the spotlight in the UK. It was over 10 years ago. I was researching in alcohol harm. I was at Liverpool John Moores University, and we were quite often asked to give presentations about alcohol harm, and used to go typically around the northwest, talking about the scale of the problem in the northwest. And we've been invited to give a presentation talking about FASD, and I did know that drinking in pregnancy wasn't a good idea, but considering I was an alcohol researcher, I really didn't. That was about all I knew. I didn't know much about it. So when we were tasked to give this presentation, I was like, what? I did what you do and just try and find out a bit more about FASD. What can I say about FASD in the Northwest? Well, it turned out virtually nothing. There's almost no information about it. Like I say, this was over 10 years ago. So what we did was, I think we just did a presentation around, it was myself and a colleague, and we did a presentation around drinking in women of childbearing age. Really, I mean, that was all we could really say, and the risks of drinking in general. Mm-hmm. But at that conference, we met Raja Mukherjee, who'd been invited up as the expert to actually talk about FASD, and that was where it all started. Really, he got us really interested in it, and I think the more we talked to him, and we did a little project where we tried to dredge for data on FASD diagnoses, and we published a paper in 2011 on that. And it was the basic argument of the paper was that it's hugely underdiagnosed, because we found very few kind of records of FASD in any hospital episodes statistics, and we sort of compared it to the rate of drinking in women, and it just didn't tie up, because it was likely that there would be a lot more. And from that point onwards, really, we started our quest to, I think Raja always says we need a prevalence study, because no one really believes how common it is, and they won't believe it until we've got the data to back it up. And we started our quest, like I say, over 10 years ago, and it's been a real battle to get anyone interested enough in it to fund it. We tried numerous, alongside our day jobs, because I was still doing a lot of research generally around alcohol and so on. We tried several funding bids and didn't get any success. So that's how it all started. You know, we persisted, and as the years have gone by, you know, things seem to be changing. There's a little bit more awareness, and the interest and the passion for it has grown. And I think it's mainly because of the injustice. I still find it really difficult when I'm writing a bid and thinking, I hope this important work gets funded, and it just seems so obvious to me that the injustice, that there's this huge group of people, there's no interventions, and we don't know enough about it. And no, you know, UKRI, it's the funding organisations, are not funding this. And in fact, it ended up being Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership, who sort of put their hand in their pocket to fund what's really actually quite a small scale study.
I think that listening to you speak about that, I think it made me realise that the common thread that everyone in the FASD world has running through them is, you know, like you say, for 10 years, you just kept going because when it clicks, and quite often that is the result of either living with it kind of accidentally, like I found myself, or if you have the luck of being in front of Raja and hearing him speak, there's no going back from that ever. I defy anybody to be in front of him, let him do his bit, and then for you to go, no, I'm not really, that doesn't interest me. I don't believe that. You know, it's you're bitten then by the bug. And I think when it clicks with you, when you understand it, and then you are able to see it all around you, that's what fuels you, I think, doesn't it? Because it's almost like a little bit of a, not a panic, but an urgency to think, oh my goodness, this is so prevalent, and this is impacting on our society on a daily basis for so many people. And why can't you see it? Why aren't you doing anything about it? Why aren't you supporting it? Why aren't you funding research? And I think that's what fuels us what I like about our community is I think it does it in a positive way. I think there's no very little kind of negativity and bashing people about or bashing services about it. It's just like, you know, look, please listen to us because this is what you are dealing with. And I know in some of the work that I do, it is so obvious to me where you know, you might have a local authority where they're really struggling with their autism service and it's completely overrun, and then the things that they're putting in place aren't really working properly. And then when you look at that area as well, they have a huge alcohol problem, and you kind of thinking, if we just go a few steps further back, this is why your autism service is overrun and isn't coping, and then the things that have been put in place aren't working because there's a huge number of those people, because of just of the logistics of your area, that have been exposed to alcohol. And it's, you know, it might be autism as well, but chances are it's FASD that you're dealing with, which is a, you know, a totally different thing. And it's when it just drives you, doesn't it? And you can't switch it off. When you are able to see that bigger picture and you want to be able to help people, you can't. It's like a don't know, it is consuming. And I think I'm very grateful to people like you who have been consumed to keep going and to think, right, I've got to prove something, because what we talk about in our podcast all the time is I'm the lived experience, and then Jess is the academic facts and figures, science behind it all. And quite often I find that as a mother, an adoptive mother, you do get a label of being this overprotective, fierce, like mother bear. And so sometimes that can take your credibility away a little bit in professional circles, because people just assume that you've got this high level of emotion attached to what you're saying. And that, you know, I would often find myself in front of people who do want to listen, and professionals, and I'm saying, you know, this is, you know, these are the kind of figures we're looking at. These are how many children in our area will be exposed to this, but then never having anything to back that up is where you feel like I've always kind of fallen down with my credibility, you know. And so I was so excited when this was getting done, when we spoke to Dr. Alan Price last year, and we knew that it was underway, to know that we were going to have something to be able to refer to be able to say, you know, this is not just making this up. This is we've got something a bit more concrete here, and it's obviously just the start, because it's the Greater Manchester area you did the study on, so which is just very small area in comparison to the country and the world. So where did you start? Like, how did you decide, like, how did you start with the study? What did you decide to do?
Yeah, so no, we started with the scoping how big it would be, and we decided that we knew we didn't have the funding to do a massive study. So the aim was to do the best study that we could for the resources available. It was unfortunate that COVID interrupted it. It actually would have been a bigger study if it hadn't been for COVID. So that was a real, there's I must admit to feeling really crushed when, lots and lots of awful things have happened during COVID.
Yeah.
But one victim was also this study, which was halfway through. So we wanted to get a range of primary schools, and we wanted to get not just primary schools in the most deprived areas, but also some in more middle class areas, and we did manage to do that. In total, we did have about 7 schools, but in the end we only finished the study properly in 3 schools. But in all of the schools we went into, we did find children with FASD, but we needed to just use the data from the schools where we'd actually managed to finish collecting all the data, otherwise we couldn't really incorporate those figures. So yeah, we did the schools were from 3 schools. One of them was from quite middle class area, and the other 2 were relatively more deprived. So we did have that little bit of variability there. We used there's a lot of methods I could talk about of how we did it. We used sort of international guidance. There've been some guidance that have been developed by WHO for doing these sorts of studies. So we based it on that and then sort of adapted it for what we could do practically. I think the tricky thing about it is if you go and get a full diagnosis of FASD, particularly if you go to Raj's clinic, it's a 2-day process. They spend about a day doing different assessments directly with the child, and then they spend another day taking a lot of history and all sorts of and doing some questionnaires with the parents that also help sort of identify the child's where they are developmentally. So what we had to do was try and distill that really long process down into something we could do in a study with all the children that we wanted to look at. So that was one thing we had to think about. And then the other thing we had to think about was how can we narrow down the number of children if we can't, even if we shorten the assessment time, you can't do that on every single child. That wouldn't be very practical. We've got to take a sample somehow. So the first thing we did was narrow it down to an age group. And the best advice seemed to be we went for the age group, I think it was year 4, 8 and 9 year olds. So they'd be at the right age where some of the tools that you use, the measurements and things, are valid, and also old enough to be showing some of the problems that kind of develop in that, by the time you get to that age, it's where the problems are probably the easiest to pick up. So we want to be able to see how big the problem is. We probably need to pick the age at which the problems show themselves the most, and this seemed to be the right age to go for. And we then, so in the 3 schools, we had 220 children that were of the right age. So we need to think, well, how many of them are we going to fully assess for FASD? So what we decided to do was look at all of those who we knew would be at a higher risk. So all of the ones who are on the school's special educational needs register, and all of the ones who were looked after, so either or previously looked after, so were either adopted or fostered, and all of those who were also small for their age. So the first thing we did with the 220 children was, unless the parents actually withdrew them from the study or if they were absent from the school that day, if they're actually present, we measured all the heights and weights and the head circumferences. And then, so we could work out which ones were, because as you'll know, alcohol consumption doesn't always, probably in a minority of cases, would have caused sufficient growth restriction, and that would be an indicator that that they might be at risk. But of course, children are small for a number of reasons, so it's not. But it was just one of the ways we screened people into the study. And then finally, and I think this was interesting and important, we also just appealed to parents if they were worried about their children, even if the school wasn't worried. But if they were worried, they could just opt their child into the study. So by the time we'd done that, of the 220 children, some of them didn't take part because they were withdrawn, but we ended up with a list of 50 that we wanted to do the full assessments on. So we wrote to those 50, and the school tried to contact them on our behalf, and the school's put in so much effort into trying to get everyone possible, because we really emphasised, if we don't, the quality of the study entirely depends on whether you can get everyone to take part. And then when they do take part, the next key thing is being able to get an accurate alcohol history. And that's the really, really difficult thing. So the first thing that happened was we got 26 out of the 50 that we wanted. Okay. And the ones that didn't take part, they were actually the ones that we would have, that in some cases, they were the ones that the school really wanted us to look at. They might be from families where they knew that they were struggling. It was rumoured or known that the family struggled with alcohol issues, for example, although it was just in a fairly chaotic. I mean, there was one case where a child was actually excluded on our list, was actually excluded before we could assess them. So it was that. So it was those, actually, the ones that didn't take part were actually quite a high risk group. It was also really hard to get the local authority to give consent of children who were fostered. So the automatic reaction is just to decline, the low, don't take a risk, just say no, and which I think that's a huge, ethical problem. What we were offering to parents was the chance to find out more about your child. If you're worried about your child's development, we sold it to the parents as a developmental assessment. We listed the things that might come up, including ASD and ADHD, and we did say in our study materials that the study was designed to look for FASD. We were promising them a report that was wider than that. So I think for those children, it was such a shame that we couldn't get permission for them to take part, and that was despite the research. I should mention the researcher on this project, who was absolutely phenomenal. She was going to take part today, wasn't she? Robin McCarthy. She's amazing. I mean, she got all the schools involved, and she just worked on this project tirelessly. She was just a complete force of nature to get this, what is actually a really difficult project, executed. It was in a large part to her. Where was I? I've just lost track. Yes, I was trying to persuade these. Yeah, so Robin was, not just ringing the social workers, but ringing their bosses and their bosses' bosses, and she was doing everything to try and get someone who'd had the authority to help these children to take part. Anyway, we got the 26, and they were a mixture. Some parents opted their children into the study, and there's some that were just small, some who were on the special educational needs, and we did get a few of the looked after children as well. And of the 26, we found 4 cases of FASD, and there were, stories from mums who had drunk just a bit, or just kind of drinking like normal young women did, and not knowing they were pregnant till quite late. Heavy drinking at weekends. So some sad stories like that, and there were other sad circumstances. No one drinks deliberately to hurt their baby. And then there were some children who were looked after as well. We also found a lot of other developmental issues. It wasn't just the FASD. There were another 4 cases that we felt would have fitted the criteria for FASD, but maybe the alcohol history was a bit was missing, but their actual characteristics fitted quite well. And there was one who also we failed to get a sample to rule out a genetic reason. So that's a bit I forgot to say. You have to rule out other causes of these problems. So we took a saliva sample and sent that off. So yeah, in one case that failed, and otherwise that child would have fulfilled the criteria for FASD. So when you work out the sums, we were saying we had about 1.8% to 3.6 for FASD or possible FASD. And when you consider that we didn't measure half the children that we set out to measure, I think you could say it was probably an estimate on the low side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, especially as you say that the group who were most likely, or who you feel were probably the ones that you needed to focus on, and the schools were hoping you would focus on, were the ones that were ruled out. What I kept thinking, as you talked about the parents and how some removed them from the study, and permissions weren't sought and given for some of the looked after children. Did you find a lot of resistance from parents, even after explaining that it was a developmental study and that you were trying to do it for positive reasons? Did you, once they'd learned about FASD, did you feel that there was any resistance from the parents around their children taking part?
Well, I think what we did was really rely on the schools to make that first contact for us. So we didn't have the direct contact details unless parents had given their permission to the school. And I think that was the best way of doing it, because the schools know their families the best. But yes, there were, I surmised by the fact that they didn't take part that there was that resistance. The other thing that was a shame is we went into a special school for social, behavioural and emotional needs, where you might have thought that possibly FASD would probably be a contributing factor to some of the children being in such a school. And the head was really, really supportive and really wanted the school to take part. And she tried to invite all the eligible children to take part, and there was no interest at all. The parents wouldn't take part, and we thought that probably those children that were in that school were getting the support that they needed, or their parents perceived that they got that support, so they didn't need to take part in the study to find out, to be assessed again. They'd probably been assessed to get that place, and maybe they felt the child was in the right place to support their needs, and there was no particular point in finding out whether or not they had potentially another condition. They probably had, I don't know, various diagnoses already and didn't see the value of having another one. So in that case, we did have a little bit more information in the sense of why those particular parents didn't want to take part.
See, I can't. My overwhelming thought about it all is, and this is the bit that makes me really sad, is that my belief is that it's all about the stigma around it. It's all about the stigma around alcohol and blame and having done something wrong. And I think that's what we work tirelessly towards, just ridding the stigma, because you can't help thinking that because I cannot, as a mother of three, so I want to go back to the age group you chosen was absolutely perfect, because all of the families who I support and work with, I try in the best possible and most positive way prepare them for age 9 in school. Because my study, my little research study of my 3 children in 3 consecutive school years was that without fail, year 9, everything just imploded and exploded at the same time. It was like a huge mix of schools started to struggle to support, the kids started to struggle with lots of different things, and I think at around about that age, the level of expectation raises, you know, you know, the junior element, the next key stage, and I think must be some kind of a shift in brain development. But age 9 is such a difficult age for kids with FASD in school, and it is when things really become apparent. So to me, you know, especially and you can imagine that the schools will have thought, this is such a gift. You know, we have to wait so long to get access to any kind of assessment for any of our kids. This is, you know, and you can just imagine how readily they will have wanted these families to take part. So to me as a parent, the only reason that I can think of that someone would say no is the stigma, is the fact that they don't want to, that they either know that they accidentally drank alcohol and have this horrible guilt, which just makes me, it's devastating to think that, because when you said it, Penny, just totally naturally, I don't think, if we were to listen to every single episode of our podcast, I don't think there was one single episode where naturally in conversation the words are uttered, no mother purposefully drinks alcohol to harm an unborn baby. It's, you know, it's, for whatever reason, it's never done purposefully, but as a society there's still this stigma and shock and blame that, you know, that's been done to a child. So I think, and it's so sad to think that you know, I think it's inevitable that that's played a huge part in people not wanting to take part, especially, you know, if they're struggling and if they think school has offered them this opportunity. You know, there might have been even a worry that they're thinking, well, if, you know, what'll happen to me? Like, will I get into trouble? If this gets diagnosed, will I get into trouble for having done this? And, you know, it's the opposite, isn't it? Because we're just trying to create services to support this group of vulnerable children and young people and adults right the way through their lives. So I think we had to start somewhere, didn't we? And it's an amazing start. And I think I can only imagine.
If I may say, just interrupting, how brave, you know, we did have mothers who took part, and, you know, that was a really brave thing to do. And I think the other thing was, I think when we started out, people were really worried about what impact that giving that news to a mother would have, you know, and I suppose that the ones who chose to take part would probably, it didn't seem as if their world ended on getting the news, you know. I think there may be some sort of started on that journey towards, okay, now I just want the best to help my child, like any parent would. And we actually managed to talk to one or two of them afterwards, or have an email exchange with one or two of them afterwards. And you know, it's a very sensitive topic. Obviously, we didn't ask them very directly about, you know, about their actual feelings about causing harm. We didn't. You know, we just asked how they experienced taking part in the study and getting the report, and they found it helpful. Okay. You know, and they thanked us for sort of giving them some signposts. They said, you know, the things that, because we gave a comprehensive report and it also had tips on what to do, you know, where to get the further help, and because we hadn't done a full assessment, for example, for autism spectrum. So if a child had come up with autism spectrum, we'd be saying you need to go, you know, to get fully assessed for that. So it was, and various other tips and things, and, you know, the parents were just very grateful.
Yeah, you can imagine, because no matter how hard the news might have been to take, if it, you know, you're dealing with a biological family where, you know, because there's just such a blame culture around it, which is just, like I say, it's devastating, but it's something that I think will take a long time to get rid of. If they are struggling to support their child, if they know their child has been struggling in school, you would probably be nothing but deeply grateful that you've been able to access all of this information, and also a little, no matter, it'll be conflicting, but I can imagine a little bit of relief, because it would give you some understanding of what's going on, what you're dealing with, where to go next. so like such mixed feelings, but I think brave for everybody, because this is something that we come across time and time again when talking to professionals, that they feel it's uncomfortable. It's not an easy conversation to have, simply because of our society's attitude around alcohol and alcohol consumption. So it makes it difficult, that you worry that people are going to become defensive, like you are doing it in an accusatory way, and it's I think it's brave for everybody involved to have, it's certainly not an easy study to have taken on, just because of the emotion around it and the nature of it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also you have to, that those women were unlucky, because some people can drink and it seems to get away with it, just with a combination of genetics and things. So whereas other people can be really unlucky and the drinking not what society would consider drinking an unusually large amount.
Yeah.
It's alcohol is our favourite drug, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us drink too much, and then I'm a firm believer, because as I said at the beginning, I'm researching alcohol harm more widely, and I'm a firm believer that to get more at the root cause of the problem, we need to look at our alcohol, the society more widely, and how sort of it's almost drenched in alcohol, isn't it? How difficult it is to walk through a supermarket and not pick up a bargain bottle of wine. It accompanies everything we do socially, and you have to make excuses not to drink.
You do. So from a mother of my age, so like an independent mother of my age, and I enjoy social media, so Instagram, like just everywhere. What I am, so my age group of motherhood, what I am bombarded with from every angle is, if you're tired, have a drink. If you're excited, have a drink. If something's gone wrong, have a drink. If something's gone well, have a drink. And I'm not anti-alcohol at all. If it didn't give us a hangover, I would probably have the odd drink. My life means that I'm awake during the night, I'm awake multiple times, I just can't do it. But it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy a lovely glass of wine when I'm having something to eat, or to go out and have a good time. But it's, you kind of, and I have felt myself, I was thinking this in the car the other day. I'd seen something on social media. It was somebody I knew, and it was like a lunchtime, and they'd gone out for lunch and they were having a few glasses of Prosecco. And all I was thinking was, like, is there something wrong with me? Because I couldn't have actually, like, I would have fallen asleep. I wouldn't have been able to function for the rest of the day. And I found myself getting, but actually this is the level of pressure you have. I was getting a bit frustrated. I felt like I was missing out on something, because I was thinking, I can't do that. Like, even if I was in a position to be able to logistically do it, I can't physically do it. And it was frustrating, because I was thinking, I wonder if, like, am I the odd one out? Because so many people seem to be able to just drink better than me. And that was my thought process, to be able to consume alcohol better than me. Like, it was something that I should be doing anyway, and that I'm not doing a good job of. And that is how, at 45 years old, that is how society has shaped my thinking about alcohol. And it's, it's just, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just, that is where we are, and that's what we're dealing with.
Coming from somebody who's 24-hour period, 365 days, every waking and non-waking moment of your entire life is consumed by the harms of alcohol. Mm-hmm. And your thought process still goes to, well, that's not fair, I can't have Prosecco with lunch.
I know. And then when I was driving along, and I was thinking, Claire, I can't believe you're even, like, common sense tells me that I should probably be very anti-alcohol because of what I see my children have to deal with every day. But I'm not, because it is like this deeply ingrained belief in my life that that this is, it's socially acceptable, it's absolutely safe, and even though the knowledge that I have tells me that's not true, you know. But so that's what we're dealing with. That is how difficult it's going to be to get people to think of it in a different way. If that is my thought process, that it's shaped my entire life, and I still think I can do better at it. Want to do better at it, like, you know, it really made us laugh. And then I thought, oh God, this is a big system that we need to change. But you can either you can think, well, oh, that's impossible, it's impossible, we can't do it. Or you can think, right, okay, we'll pull our sleeves up and we've got to start somewhere. And I think, you know, change is absolutely happening. You can feel it, even just in the last 12 months. The tide is moving faster, definitely. But, you know, I visited a potential new school for one of my children yesterday, and the 3 members of staff who I spoke to, who I loved the fact that they were so open about it, didn't know what FASD was. And so I was like, oh, that's absolutely no problem. I'll give you full training. I'll train the entire staff. That's, you know, don't worry about that. You will be experts at it, you know, if this is where we choose to come. But, you know, that's a kind of a special school with, you know, so you know, you forget when you are drenched in this life, you forget that key people throughout our society genuinely have no clue what it is. And that's not a criticism. I just feel for these people having to facilitate, you know, imagine running a special school and you don't really know what that is, when how many children are in that school with that going on, obviously undiagnosed. So I just, it fuels me. I think it can feel overwhelming, but it totally fuels me to keep pushing and to keep getting the word out. But this, I know Jess and I were both really excited, knowing that the prevalence study was coming, and knowing that we were going to have something to, like, look at this. This is real. You know, to give us some credibility, because we're so passionate about it. And sometimes people want the figures, don't they? They want the science behind it, and rightly so.
I think the good thing is that it sort of broadly came out as what we predicted as well. So what we'd been saying before was based on modelled estimates. So I think you probably heard the figure of 3% that came from a big systematic review and meta-analysis. So what they did there was they knew the drinking rates amongst women drinking rates in pregnancy in lots of different countries, and then in some countries they had good quality prevalence studies. So they sort of did like a mathematical relationship between how much FASD you have in your country against how many pregnant women drink. And then they sort of use that information to kind of fill in the empty bits of information. So if it was a country like the UK or Ireland who didn't have a prevalence study, they sort of worked out from the information they did have what our prevalence would be. So the fact that our findings are broadly in line with what we had expected from that, which is just knowledge of, you know, of alcohol consumption in pregnancy.
Has it has the results of this study is there anything else in the pipeline? Was it the first step towards something, or are there more studies that are going to fall out from this? Like, what are the next steps?
Well, you know, the study is quite small scale, and it would no doubt be hugely beneficial to be able to replicate it on a bigger scale and more geographical coverage. And I noticed actually around about the same time as our study was published, the Department of Health and Social Care eventually published this needs assessment, which you've probably seen and you may have talked about on your episodes before. I mean, some of the things I found in the needs assessment, I'm just going to read it out. I've got it on my other screen, so I'm just looking this way. They sort of said the needs of this population group focus on a lack of a robust prevalence estimate in England. They also talk about the importance of multi-sector working, better training and awareness for health professionals, which totally tallies with what you were just saying, better organisation of services, and a need to develop innovative approaches to support those living with the condition. So, I mean, the needs are just, those are the sort of headlines, and the needs are just enormous.
Yeah.
But yes, they are still talking about a need for better prevalence data in England. So we do continue to explore ways that we might do that.
Yeah.
And very much in the early days, but we've started talking to other academics about how we could maybe look at, as I said before, it's quite hard to find a funding council that will just pay for a study into the prevalence. It's almost like they're not set up for that. They're kind of set up to find out how things, like how medicines might work, or how an intervention might work. They're not really set up just to say, well, here's a problem, let's just describe the extent of it. So we're trying to think of another way of perhaps combining it with also following up the children and doing something around to make it more than just a prevalence study. So the early days of those.
They want to get something at the end of it, because a prevalence study is like is it almost where the funding comes from, thinking, well, what have we got to show for that, but we'll have to do it. Do you think, what are your views on, do you think that when the nice quality standards are released, do you think that might have any impact on attitudes towards funding? You know, do you think it might make it a little bit more high profile, or a little bit more urgent in the fact that, you know, the quality standards are they're going to take a little while to embed, but there are instructions as to what needs to be commissioned. So do you think that might change things or make things a little bit easier?
Yeah, I think it's going to change things. You know, it'll highlight how little we have to offer families, won't it? It'll highlight, you know, when areas actually have to provide diagnostic services, they'll be having to scratch around trying to figure out how to get that done, won't they? Yeah. And then as the need is more and more recognised, you know, something will have to come in to help all these families, and that's why we are at that. I mean, some of the work that you talked, I know you've done an interview with Alan Price, and he talked about some of the work we've been doing around interventions. You know, I'm really hoping that we've applied for some funding to get some more to test our intervention, and that's going to be a first line port of call, so that when a family gets a diagnosis, they could get some support straight away, take part in a 7-week parent education program.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it would be, I mean, you know, that we've done it on a few people so far, and Callum told you the response was amazing. They thought it was really, really, really helpful. And we're just hoping that, because that can be done by, our course is designed to be carried out by a number, you know, it could take place in a number of different settings. It doesn't need to tie up NHS resources. It could be done by charities or you know, anyone who's sort of done the training course. And yeah, I think that will just, that would be a fairly, I hope, if it's shown to be effective, I hope it'd be a cost-effective way of getting everyone immediately a bit more of that knowledge, so that they become those expert parents that can then advocate for their child. And then alongside that, I mean, organisations such as the National Organisation for FASD and all the other FASD charities they've been doing tremendous work, haven't they, in training and developing all sorts of resources and everything. So I think things are changing. I think definitely the publication of the NICE quality standards, we put that into our bid, actually, in our funding bid, to say, look, we really need to look at this now, because this is going to. Because
in the most basic of terms, you just picture a commissioner thinking, right, okay, so these are the quality standards. So this is what we've got to commission this service. How many of these people do we have in our area? Oh, we don't know, because there's no prevalence study. So that just shows the importance of having an idea, even just a ballpark figure of what your prevalence is, because otherwise, how do you just kind of like plucking out of thin air, right? Okay, well, I don't know, let's just take a guess, we'll just commission for that, and it's either, you know, nowhere near enough or too much money spent, and then we didn't need that, and so services are cut. It's just, it all starts with that. So it is the most vital piece of research to be done.
I mean, the other thing, and unfortunately at the moment, is you can say, well, how many cases have we got? And then you just look to see how many diagnoses you've got, and then you find very few, and you say, well, it's not a very big problem. And I think that's the thing, that it's the two things, isn't it? To get the diagnosis services working, and then to get the support for those families.
But it's all hopeful. I feel like this has been a really hopeful conversation and a really positive conversation, and you know, the figures are daunting, and the lack of services are daunting, but I think we're just so much further ahead than we were definitely 10 years ago, but even a couple of years ago. So it's hopeful, and we're thanks to people like you, we're moving in the right direction. So thank you. I'm very, very grateful for the work that you do.
I think the FASD community has been so fantastic to work with as well. I mean, I think, you know, the mums and families and dads, and, you know, some of the young people with FASD themselves as well. Just been, I mean, the amount of energy in that community, and the amount that you've all had to do for yourself, you know, and be the experts. That's really humbling to learn from you guys as well.
I think I always say that I think my steepest learning curve is the fact that when I refer to myself and say I'm accidentally an expert, and the reason that I can say that is for so many years I was doing everything wrong because I didn't know what I was dealing with. I didn't know I was dealing with damage to the brain. I didn't know that, and there is no better way to learn the right way to do something than doing it the wrong way repeatedly and having to deal with the consequences of that for all of us. So, you know, I think that, and that's what fuels me to know how different life can be overnight when you're doing something the right way. And that's where, so this course, this small intervention that you were talking about for parents, that's life-changing. That is life-changing stuff, because they don't need to have, it's not the kind of disability where you might need to have, you know, equipment, specialist training, medication. It is a mindset, it is an understanding of the caregivers, and when you know that, your tolerance times by 1,000,000. And so it's like, oh, okay, that's why that's happening. So, and that doesn't make you angry anymore. That gives you the compassion to think, oh my goodness, I need to protect you from that. So I need to make sure that doesn't happen again. And it changes the way you parent in a heartbeat. And it's not easy, but you get it wrong and you fall, you know, back into old ways. But you always pull yourself back around because you have that knowledge now to know that this is what you're dealing with, and it turns frustration into compassion and understanding, and that is probably the biggest piece of work that can be done with any parent or caregiver of a child with FASD. So
you've just put that really eloquently. I'm going to have to rewatch this and write that down. That was brilliant.
So will I, because I'll never remember how to say that again.
Exactly what we're trying to do.
And so as a parent who didn't have that, and who had to just stumble around in this dark, terrifying place, I absolutely know that is exactly what is needed. Like, that is what is needed, and that is what will change everything. And you get it. I know how my life is impacted when I'm on a little run of getting things right, and I'm using the correct tone of voice, I'm using the correct language, the sensory environment's the right thing. I know how joyful every aspect of my life is when that's happening. And if I had have known that 10 years ago, my kids could have just had such a different experience and such a better life, and wouldn't be struggling the way they are now. So, you know, I believe it happened for a reason. I believe everything happens for a reason. I am one of those people. But that's what fuels me to know the difference that we can make instantly to people's lives, and then the whole trajectory of their lives, and then in turn the whole of society. And that, you know, it sounds a bit dramatic, but it's the truth.
Yeah, it's a massive thing, isn't it? I think it's massive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, thank you so much, Penny. Jessica, I don't know if you want to say anything, because I have not shut up. So I've been a little bit excited by this episode.
Oh, no, I'm just really interested listening to both of you, and I can see how passionate you get, Claire, when you hear of this kind of work being done and changing the path for everybody who's there sort of 10 years behind your story. And it's really exciting to hear the work that Penny's hoping to do in the future with the team at Salford, and it's all going to change a lot quicker, isn't it? We're just talking about how everything's changing in the UK, and it's just getting faster and faster. There's just so much to keep up with for us doing this.
So will we be able to is the report out there for can we attach it to anything? Can we link to anything for our listeners and our followers?
Yes, so we have a sort of we have a website. So what will you do? Will you put it on?
I'll put it in the we'll put it out on our social media, and we'll put it in the description on our YouTube episode, so people can be able to click onto that and have a look at the work that's getting done.
So we have a website that's got a sort of an easy to read version of our findings, and we've got full scientific paper for those who are really keen.
Well, yeah, because that is the mixture of our followers. We've got lots of families and lots of caregivers, and we've got lots of professionals who tune into this to get quick fixes of information when they're driving about in the car. So there will be people who will want access to both. So we'll make sure that we put out those links on all of our details. So just thank you so much for giving us the time to explain this further, and I'm really excited for what comes next, Penny. So thank you for your time.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. Absolute privilege to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks from the baby.